Right, somehow we've got to navigate ourselves into the heart of that over there. Our walk starts at the core of the Barbican Centre, but has a much, much, much deeper past than this brutalist masterpiece. Some of you will be relieved to hear that today's walk has nothing to do with modern architecture. It just happens that the first site we're going to is in the middle of the Barbican Centre, and it is not the section of Roman wall that is here that we covered in our Roman wall walk, I don't know, wherever that was. But in the middle of this, what I described as a brutalist masterpiece. That's partly to get a reaction from some of you that hate this kind of architecture, but it is. I mean, you can't argue that as far as brutalism is concerned, this is a masterpiece. And you can see by the way I'm having to move around to find light, the way that the tower blocks here block out so much light. But within this most modern of modern developments, there is a wonderful medieval church built on the site of a much older church. And that's where today's walk, exploring the magnificent churches of the City of London, will start. I think this is episode 11. It's either 10 or 11. I've lost track slightly. There's a playlist which I'll link to below. I know a lot of you watch this on TV, so I don't know how you find playlists on TV, but all the videos are here together, grouped together. And this is the latest instalment, and I love these videos so much. I saw a feature today, not this one, a different one that compelled me to come out and shoot this video. There's one site that I'm so excited about getting to, and it's going to be sort of like 3/4 of the way through, something like that. Anyway, let's crack on and find St Giles Cripplegate, which is where we start today. The Barbican is famously a bit of a labyrinth. So finding our way to St Giles Cripplegate is not as straightforward as just going to the point on the map. So there's our church over there, our medieval church, St Giles Cripplegate. But how do we get over this body of water to actually get to it? Tell you what though, these waterscapes around the Barbican really come into their own in the glorious hot weather, don't they? This is like London's Riviera on a day like today. I think this will transport us back to the Middle Ages. And as luck would have it, the church is actually open, so let's go inside. Thankfully I have my trusty copy of Sir John Betjeman's Guide to the City of London Churches. And it's such a magnificent place to explore. I mean, they've got the statue of Milton. They've got 3 effigies of Milton, which is really keen to press home their association with John Milton, who was interred here, along with his father. I have a feeling we've seen a Milton memorial at a different church. Was it St Olaf Hart Street? Perhaps. Maybe that was where Milton worshipped rather than where he was buried. This church takes in different eras. It dates from 1394, but it was built on the site, it was remodelled or rebuilt from a Norman church built in 1090 that in itself replaced a Saxon church on the site. And you can see here with a sort of proximity to the Roman wall, this is an incredibly ancient part of London. For a future video, there are some wells and springs on the other side of the Barbican. So this is an area that goes back a long, long, long way, which is interesting, isn't it? You've got all the modern architecture, and that's the association with the Barbican. People don't think of this as being a site of ancient worship. They've also got large, sort of like a bust of Oliver Cromwell, who got married here to Elizabeth Bouchier. I hope I got that pronunciation correct, in 1620. And then also you have Martin Frobisher as well associated with this church. You have a number of sort of notable people, which isn't that surprising given where it is in the city. Even so, it is a real repository of London law. It was damaged by fire 3 times. I've got the dates here so I don't have to remember them. It was damaged by fire in 1545, 1897, and then of course it was badly damaged during the Blitz, which the interior of the church was then completely remodelled after the war. It's a really magnificent place. What a great start to this episode of City of London Churches. Coming up, we've got a couple of things that I'm really excited about. One is a church I've been trying to get into, or trying to feature, for ever since I started this series over 4 years ago, or around 4 years ago, and it was covered in scaffolding that entire time. I think now the scaffolding is off that church, and then later on we have a church, sort of partly a lost church, that's hidden within the fabric of our great and most famous church. And I've forgotten to do the kind of recap of the City of London churches, how many there were, how many were destroyed. We'll do that. I always do that at the beginning of a video. So we're going to head down here, down Wood Street to St Lawrence Jewry. So there were originally 108 churches in the City of London, 109 if you include St Paul's. Of those, better get the number right, 39 remain. That's 39 though inside the City of London. What's interesting is the Friends of the City of London actually include a number of other churches that are dotted around the edge of the City of London itself. So maybe we'll do a walk with those in. But if we go by the original 108, there's 39 of those remain. 34, see if I remember that right, 34 were lost in the Great Fire of London in 1666 and not rebuilt. Some were also demolished. 26 were demolished in an 1860 Act of Parliament that reorganised the parishes of the City of London, which is interesting. 26 lost just by administrative thing. They deleted loads of churches. 34 in the Great Fire of London that weren't rebuilt, which is amazing. And then the final thing which did for the City of London churches was the Blitz during the Second World War, where a number of churches were destroyed. Some of them were completely gutted and not restored. Some were gutted like St Giles Cripplegate, and that they were partly rebuilt. It's interesting. Like, there's a massive tourist group doing the same route as me. And then during the Blitz, some of those churches remain, just as I'm trying to get it in shot, remain simply as either towers, churchyards, or in fact some of them, there are plaques. Like we've got, look, the wonderful St Alban behind us. We will visit at least 2 of those on this walk. One of them you wouldn't actually know is there because it's subsumed into the fabric of a much bigger, more famous church. It's really hard filming in the City of London with all the shadows and now the dust in my throat. We plough on. It's fantastic to turn the corner into Gresham Street and see this here, the restored St Lawrence Jewry. Wow, gleaming edifice. Always good to take advantage of the official information about the church. St Lawrence Jewry is so called because the original 12th century church stood near the site of an ancient synagogue, thus distinguishing it from 2 other St Lawrence churches in the City of London. Built in 1136, St Lawrence Jewry was destroyed in the Great Fire of London in 1666. The new church was designed and rebuilt on the same site by Sir Christopher Wren, whose practice secured commissions to replace 51 of London's churches, employing Nicholas Hawksmoor. The interiors were destroyed by fire in December 1940 during World War II. The building was restored in 1957. Extensive repairs and building conservation works were undertaken and completed in 2023. Wow, it's the official church of the Corporation of London, the City of London Corporation. You'll see why, because it's built basically facing the Guildhall. This poses an intriguing question when we look at the site of St Lawrence Jewry on the site of a much older synagogue. If this was built in the 1100s, there would have been a Jewish community in London during the Roman period. Where was that based? Does anyone know? I know you are a brilliant group of people. Somebody amongst you will know the answer to that question. A previous episode of the City Churches series deals with the wonderful, majestic Guildhall over there and the Roman amphitheatre in the basement of the Guildhall Art Gallery. I think I might go for a mooch in the bookshop. We'll go down here, one of my favourite little medieval thoroughfares, Ironmonger Lane, and we'll look for the echo, or actually more than an echo, it's an actual great big tower, and some parish boundary markers. The most famous of the city religious buildings, one would say, St Paul's Cathedral. And somewhere around the footprint of St Paul's Cathedrals we have the remains of not one but two lost churches. I had no idea we're here. Let's go hunting. These are not the parish boundary markers we're looking for here. Got St Vitus, alias Foster, and St Michael and something. That's not what we're after. Aha, there it is. That's almost as significant to me as finding a massive great big lump of something. Look, it's the parish of St Faith. St Faith, the church that was here, that gave itself over in the 13th century to allow the eastern expansion of the old St Paul's Cathedral. That's one of the few remains. There are a couple of others. So the story goes that St Faith's was a completely separate church to St Paul's Cathedral, to the east of St Paul's, and then in 1256 it was demolished to allow for the eastward expansion of St Paul's. This is the old St Paul's, pre-Great Fire St Paul's. And then the parishioners, who were basically drawn from the people that worked in the printing trade around Paternoster Row, sort of like over there, they were given a space to worship in the old crypt of St Paul's. Do they still have a space to worship in the crypt of St Paul's? Maybe we'll go for a look. So that church was demolished. That's the first part of the story. There's a lot of people around here. So when St Paul's, the old St Paul's, was destroyed by the Great Fire of London in 1666, the parish of St Faith, remember the parishioners are worshipping in the crypt, they're given a space in the crypt, their parish is merged with the parish of this church behind me here, St Augstine Watling Street, and formed the combined church, the parish of St Faith and St Augustine. And St Augustine's church was destroyed by bombing in the Second World War, but there's a beautiful story associated with that event, that terrible event in 1940, in that there was a stray cat turned up at the church in 1936, and the vicar kept trying to turf the cat out, and the cat kept coming back time after time after time, and eventually the vicar just let the cat stay, and the cat was named Faith by the parishioners, and it would be there hunting mice during the Sunday services. Lovely stuff. The night before the church was destroyed in the Blitz, the night before, Faith had a kitten, and she kept taking her kitten down into the crypt of the church, and they kept trying to get Faith to come out of the crypt with her kitten, and 3 times she came, they got her up. Was it 3 times or 7 times? A number of times they got Faith to bring her kitten out, and each time she went back down into the crypt of the church, deep into the church with her kitten, and eventually they just left her. That night, the next night, the church was destroyed in the Blitz, the fabric of the church, and people sorted through the rubble looking for Faith and her kitten, and there beneath all the rubble, there was Faith, still guarding her kitten, both of them alive and well. Isn't that a beautiful story? It's a really lovely story. And St Augustine's here is first mentioned in 1146, so it's one of the medieval churches. This tower isn't medieval. The church was destroyed in the Great Fire of 1666, and it was rebuilt by Sir Christopher Wren, one of the 51 churches rebuilt by Wren. But this is all that remains after the bombing during the Blitz. And it's so easy to overlook St Augustine's here, standing as it does in the shadow of the great St Paul's Cathedral. But you could say it's every bit as important in its own way. And of course it has the wonderful story of Faith the cat. And here is another remnant of the old parish here. This water pump in the, it's sort of in the churchyard of St Paul's. It's on the edge of Paternoster Square, and it says erected by St Faith's Parish 1819. So there's one more site on today's walk. Very close by, we're just going to go around the edge of St Paul's Cathedral, then down Godliman Street, brilliantly named road for this area. It's always good to collect a few of these along the way. Here on Queen Victoria Street we've got the site of Blacksmith's Hall, 1668 to 1785. Now it's just whatever this is. And just coming down Lambeth Hill, it's just such a beauty, isn't it? This is St Mary Somerset. The original church was recorded in the 12th century, destroyed in the Great Fire of London, 1666, and then this majestic tower was part of the church rebuilt by Sir Christopher Wren. Interestingly, the body of the church was demolished in 1871, so I'm guessing that was either part of the 1860 Act, or it could have been for the building of Upper Thames Street. But just as a tower, it is a real beauty, isn't it? The first question I ask myself is, how have I missed this? Because I've done all the churches around it, even the towers around it. But maybe I didn't miss it. It'd be interesting to see how I feel when I get down to the gardens. I have a vague memory of sitting in the garden, but let's go down. Among the notes about the church is one that says that it was associated with a place called Somers Hive, which appears to have been a small haven on the Thames. I guess it was people from that haven worshipped at the church. It was also at one point the churchyard was used by by weavers from Brabant, Flemish weavers who were ordered to gather here for the purposes of hiring. This is why I think I may have covered it in a previous video, but then they were redirected to St Lawrence Pulteney, which is in a previous video. Even if it has been already mentioned, it is definitely worth mentioning again. When it was sold to be deconstructed in the 1870s, the proceeds of the sale were used to build the church at Hoxton Parish Church. Now, unless I'm very much mistaken, I think that is the last of the City of London churches that I've done, and the towers. I think I've done the towers and the churches within the square mile. Now, there might be a few modern churches inside the square mile, and there's some fascinating churches around the fringe of the square mile that I think I will cover in a video. Whether it's, what do you think? Do places like St Ethelburga's, do they count? There's enough of them. There's enough of them around the edge of the city to maybe include in a further episode. If not, that could be the end of the City Churches videos. I think it's my favourite series. I think I have to say, I mean, obviously London Loop, it's a tough one, isn't it? It's a tough one. I don't have to choose a favourite, do I? So thank you for coming on that walk in the City of London with me, exploring the magnificent history of the churches of the City of London. What a real gem and a treasure this has been, this series. I love these walks so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your support. And as I always like to say, I look forward to seeing the next walk, wherever that may be.
It's over the meadow, over the stream, it's where I am going and where I have been. It's been a long day now, it's time for a beer, and now for home, of course I must steer. It's over the meadow, over the stream,